Hi everybody. I wanted to have a little talk about some conversations I have fairly regularly and recently about BDD with different people that I meet at interviews and the like. Um, and one of the things I hear about is that what people use BDD for and why they use it. And I just wanted to go through some of these things and my thoughts on it. So one thing that I quite often hear is that people say they do BDD because they like how the feature files are written in a given when then form, and it's they use it for documentation. But this is a very curious thing because personally, I don't find feature files that good for documentation um, because of how you can write them. If you do them in a given when then form, it's quite restrictive. So, um, you know, and BDD really isn't for documentation. It's for describing behavior and sharing the information across the team. You know, and also BDD is a bit more than that. It's apart from the feature file, it's also about the implementation of the steps and the automation of those steps. Um, when you take into account that people sometimes mention living documentation, this becomes even more complicated because if the documentation is living, then the implementation has to change as well. And um, if something's living, then you kind of assume that it's changing a fair bit, so the whole thing just becomes a maintenance nightmare. Um, the other thing that I've heard is people say that um, they like BDD and feature files because it's a nice way to let non-technical testers, i.e. testers that can't code, I think is really what they mean, help with the automation process by writing these feature files. First of all, I'm not sure how that is actually helping because they're just writing feature files and they need to do this handover to a different person that implements it. Depending on the quality of that handover, um, there's a lot of assumptions and opportunities for miscommunication. So, and also by its very nature, if you have to do an extra handover, rather than the person writing the test, writing the feature files and things like that. In this particular scenario, this just seems more time consuming for me. I don't really know how this would really improve efficiency um, or arguably quality as well. Um, maybe if the tester that couldn't do automation sort of paired with the tester that could do that was going to do the automation, or the developer, this may be better, but still, this doesn't sound like a very good way. If they really wanted to help, I personally think it'd be more beneficial if they either learn how to code or just focus on the manual testing. Not everybody has to help out with automation. Not everybody has to do automation, so I'm not so sure about that either. And as I mentioned before, writing feature files in a given when then form is very restrictive for a bunch of reasons. I mean, it's been mentioned that the given when then form, apart from the fact that normal people don't speak in given when then, and you can't really describe a lot of things sort of fluently in that form. I've also heard people talk about how the given when then form only talks about a single actor rather than both sides of the interaction. By that I mean, so if you're building a system, there's the person using it and also the person that's on the receiving end of that transaction, the service, the tool, but you either only describe what the customer wants or you describe what the user wants. It is rare, and in fact it probably be a bit odd to describe both users in one scenario, because they don't often have the same requirement. Um, and sometimes people tell me that it makes writing automation easier, and this definitely again sounds bizarre to me, because versus writing a straight JUnit or TestNG test, this seems a lot more complicated, because you have the feature file, the step file, and then the actual implementation. So now, rather than having just your page object and your test, you have at the very least 2 extra levels of abstraction, and that in itself, the first time implementation, arguably is not so bad. You can do a lot of autocomplete with some of the tooling, and that's fine. But it's the maintenance. Every time you change your feature files, you need to go and update your step definition and then the underlying implementation as well, right? And if you don't do this, then, well, clearly things get out of sync. So this, again, becomes an implementation nightmare or maintenance nightmare. You've gone from maybe having to maintain 1 or 2 files to at least doubling that. So, this is also a tricky trap. The other thing that people often forget is they often, and maybe this is also a bias based on who I usually discuss this with a lot of times, is testers and sometimes developers. And that this is something that testers and developers do, which is kind of odd, because I believe the original intention of in fact the intention of BDD, it is called behavior-driven development, was a top-down methodology, and ultimately it was meant to foster communication and interaction and understanding of the system you're building throughout the whole team, from the product owners or the users downwards, rather than just an isolation of the testers knowing about all the feature files and things like that. And in fact, ideally, it wouldn't even, the feature files just wouldn't even come from a technical person. And the last thing is that BDD just really isn't about the tooling. Like I just mentioned, it's really more about the interaction. But these days, we talk a lot about the tooling, the problems it gives us, and things like that. So the thing that I really want to highlight here is not that there are problems. There are problems with a lot of things, but really it's to remind people of what BDD is and what it was meant to be. For me and my understanding, BDD really, as I mentioned before, was meant to be a top-down methodology to foster communication, interaction, better understanding of the system, the product you want to build, and to help with that design of the system. It's not about individually any of the things that I've mentioned before. And the second thing also is to think about why is it that you are doing BDD. I mean, if you mention one of these things, if you're doing it because of one of these things, that you want live documentation, you want to make it easier to automate, you want to get non-automators helping out, I believe that there are better ways of doing it. Right? If you want documentation, then there's a lot of good documentation tooling out there. If you want live documentation that's somehow tied to your tests, there are actually frameworks out there that facilitate this better, I believe. Also things like Given When Then, there are toolings out there that help you around having to get tied with Given When Then. For example, a tool I recently tried out was Gauge, that lets you write in free text. And in fact, if you're using um, languages like JavaScript and Scala um, and Groovy, um, I think they're often built-in frameworks that just let you write a test name in free text, um, which alleviates the need to have even some other tooling or abstraction above that to be able to describe what your test is in free text. So I say that if your purpose is not to do top-down um, development and design, or to foster the interaction, you just want these things. You just want documentation. You want to make writing tests easier. There are things out there to help you specifically with that, rather than try to use a BDD framework and work under the guise of doing BDD to do it, because you'll just end up using the wrong tool for the wrong reasons, and this will probably make you make it harder in the medium, or in fact, I think you'll find it tricky very, very, very quickly. And really, it's like I wanted to just remind everybody to have a think about why we are doing it. It's very popular now. BDD is very popular now. I know quite a few developers and development teams where they use it, and the developers love it. But I really would like people to think more about why they are using BDD and its tooling. It's not a perfect way to do it, and by for me personally, I faced a lot of the problems that I've discussed above here, and I found out the hard way why using BDD tooling gets tricky when you're doing with testing. I mean, some of the things I've faced was tests becoming tedious to write because there's so many layers of abstraction, trying to maintain them. There's a lot of scaffolding code. The BDD frameworks themselves, some of them are relatively restrictive or limited in their functionality. For example, behave doesn't have the full set of before and after hooks to do class-wide or class befores or suite befores. You really have to do a relatively complex hack that's from my research isn't really that dependable. But anyway, that's all I have, and I hope if you're watching this and doing BDD, have a think about your options, and I would really love to hear from people about this and see what you come up with. As I've mentioned, I found some tools that fit my needs better, so look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks, bye.